Hi and welcome back to the channel. Steven right here with a figure review for today. This is possibly the only genuine scale figure I know of that gets released 5 times. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think this is the only figure we get with 5 releases. And this figure had a notorious reputation in the past. We'll talk about that in a minute. Why did it took me so long to buy this figure today? I bought it in late 2023, in December 2023. So I just received it in early 2024 in January. The very main reason why I bought one is because, well, I love Scathach. That's firstly. And secondly, this was dirt cheap for scale figure. You see, let me bring up the amounts I paid on Taobao in China. For this figure, it is about 340 Malaysian ringgit, which is almost exactly 10,000 Japanese yen, including shipping. And I already have the Q version, which I never reviewed on this channel. I will at some point because I planned to buy the second Ascension version where she is having this gold color thing on her head. And then I want to review both versions side by side. I want to buy the other version, right? Which is why I have not reviewed that one yet by Q. Now we shall take a look at Plum's Scathach first, which is possibly the very first Scathach scale figure ever made, right? Back in year 2016. So 5 releases. Let me give you a timeline over here. I need myfigurecollection.net to help me out on this one. The very first release on this figure, November 2016 for 12,500 yen. 3 years later, re-released in January 2019 for 12,500 yen as well. And then a year later in June 2020, a second re-release, same price. Year 2022, 2 years ago, third re-release for 14,500 yen. Merely 2,000 yen price increase before taxes, of course. That is actually very reasonable. And the next re-release, the fourth one, would be this year, April 2024. Which is insane, right? Plum as a figure brand is not a very highly reputable one. They are kind of mid-tier figure brands, and they have a history of QC issues on certain figures. Not every one of them, but certain figures. Yet, this thing is so popular to get 5 releases. What is up with this figure? What is it so special? We shall find out soon. Before that, a quick mention about her box. You see, this was a really cheap figure. You could say this scale figure of Scathach over here is the equivalent of 2 pop-up parades. And I would rather you buy something like this, a really low-cost scale figure, over buying pop-up parades, which are horrible most of the time. Now, speaking of the box of this figure, this is the one thing I'm the most impressed with. No, it is not the quality of the box. This box is just ordinary paper box you'll find in many low-cost scale figures. It won't protect the figure much, right? But number 1, the box is quite good looking. And number 2, this box arrived from China to Malaysia. It arrived in perfect condition. Not a single scratch, not a single dent. And I really wish that I could show you guys the carton boxing, the purple color carton boxing of this figure, but I accidentally threw the box away, right? Otherwise, I would show that portion as well during the unboxing. So what the seller did was that they put 2 layers of packaging. This box in a brown carton box, and that brown carton box inside another brown carton box. So the box was super rigid, super stiff. Even if you tossed it like a basketball, this thing wouldn't dent. The seller did an amazing job with packaging this figure. So yeah, this is a 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 box quality wise, and the amount of protection it provides to the figure. But at this price point, I won't complain too much. But really, a big thumbs up to the seller for the excellent packaging when they shipped the figure internationally. Alright, moving on to the figure itself. Well, the very first release of this Scathach, 2016, so that was almost 8 years ago. This figure had a notorious problem of arriving decapitated in the box. The neck was just break, the head of the figure would just break off, right? Maybe if you search in myfigurecollection.net, you might come across pictures of that happening. But since then, since the first re-release in year 2019, and in every subsequent re-releases, this figure no longer has any issues with the neck. It doesn't break in the box anymore. So I have no idea what happened to the 2016 version, like did they cut any corners in the materials? But what I'm suspecting over here is a very similar issue to what happened to my figure of Caster, what was the name again? Caster Anastasia from Kotobukiya, also FGO. So that figure of Caster, her neck arrived broken and dislodged in the box as well, just like this first edition of Scathach. And the culprit has to be the hair, you see. So I wouldn't call the hair of this figure very heavy, but it is certainly bulky. Not as bad as Anastasia, but still pretty bulky. So imagine this figure sitting inside the box. Right, sitting inside this box, the figure is facing the front this way, and all the postman needs to do, the courier needs to do, is to bang the back of the box like that, bam, like that, and then you hit against the back of the hair, it will twist the neck will just break off. That is what I suspected. So character design is part of the problem, while the second problem was the box not offering enough protection. But what Plum may have done, this is purely my own guess because I did not have the 2016 version, there was a huge plastic block underneath the hair over here. There is no paint bleeding concerns over here, no paint transfer concerns. It is not like the hair, the paint on the hair would end up on the body of the figure. It won't happen with this huge gap over here. So what I'm guessing over here is that this plastic block did not exist in the original 2016 version, or it was something softer like a sponge maybe. So now that they place a plastic block over here, which you saw it in the unboxing process, an impact from the back of the figure wouldn't place too much stress on the neck because this plastic block over here is stopping the hair from caving in. And this is probably the only small change Plum did to this figure. It is not like they reinforced the figure or changed the material or anything. I don't think that happens at all given how low this figure cost. And now this figure's neck is no longer a problem, right? So if you are still thinking of buying this figure of Scathach, I would say go ahead. I don't think the neck is a concern anymore today. I don't have any issues with the sculpting at all, right? The seam lines, the glues, the gaps and everywhere, everything is quite neat. No major issues over here. And then the sculpting, I guess it is what it is. This is not a super detailed figure. But at the same time, it is okay for the pricing of 10,000, 12,000 yen, right? And moving on to the paint job. There are quite a lot of shading on this figure actually. If you see very carefully with your own eyes, you can see a lot, like very heavy shading. I love it. The second thing is that the paint is very dark to the extent it feels like a black hole. Yes, the black hole you see in outer space, which even light could not escape. It feels like that, you know? Like no matter how bright the settings of my studio lights are, the figure just appears really dark in videos and in photos, like the paint is just absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. So it was really difficult to film and photograph this figure. And to make things worse, the eyes are the exact opposite of the rest of the figure. Super shiny, super glossy. So if I were to increase the brightness of my studio lights too much to film this review, yeah, the eyes would start reflecting too much light and then you get this glare, this shiny white glare, which is terrible no matter how you look at it. So this figure really gave me quite the challenge in photography and videography, right? Speaking of the paintwork as well, while there are no major quality control issues on my copy of Scathach over here, well, there is a small flaw, or this is also kind of quality control related. It is not something you can see unless you shine a really bright light on the figure and you just turn the figure around. If you see carefully on the right side of a right leg over there, yeah, you can see this line running across. That is what we call a micro scratch. It is not something you can see unless you shine light on it and then you start turning around the figure. You see a line running across, but it is not a scratch on the paint itself, but more of a very superficial layer of scratch, maybe on the clear coating, for example, right? And this kind of things happen when you are careless in handling a figure. For example, you are doing cleaning on your shelf, right, your display shelf, and then you just dump all of the figure into a box and then all the figures are rubbing against each other, and that is when something like this happens. We call it a micro scratch. Unfortunately, this is something very common, extremely common, even in outer figures actually, the expensive ones. Very common in anime figures nowadays, so I wouldn't knock Plum too hard for this fault I found on this figure, but still it would be nice to not have any of it, of course. And then speaking of assembly of this figure, right, very straightforward, very simple. The first thing is that I like the spear on this figure the placement and assembly a lot more than the previous FGO figure I reviewed, which was, what was her name again? You see, she was so forgettable. What was her name again? Brandhilder, right? So with Brandhilder by Amakuni, which is a much superior figure to this Scathach, Amakuni made this decision of using a plastic rod to support her spear because there is no plug between the spear and the hand of the figure. It would just fall off like that, and I did not like it. With this figure of Skadi or Scathach, there is a peg between the spear and her right hand over there. It just plugs into the back of her palm over here, which is really nice. I prefer it this way. Initially, it can be a bit difficult to plug it in. You need to get the angle right. Most of the time, it is the angle that makes it difficult. But once you get the angle right, it goes in very snugly, no issues at all. Very firm, in fact. Perfect tightness over here. But this top half over here, yeah, this top half of the spear, it is quite tight when you join it together. So if you want to take these two parts apart and put the figure back in the box, be careful. Meanwhile, the foot pegs on this figure, just plastic, no metal, which I think is fine for a figure like this. This is a very lightweight figure. And yeah, there is no major weight imbalance where you need a stronger support, right? And the plastic foot peg in this figure, right, they are the very short and the very thick type. Like the diameter of the cylindrical peg is very big. It is very thick and short. So this kind of plastic peg, it won't break very easily. So I don't think it is an issue with this figure. And speaking of the base, yeah, this almost feels like a price figure base rather than the base of an expensive scale figure, but maybe because I paid a really small amount of money for this figure, I'm willing to overlook it, right? So arriving at the conclusion of today's review, can I recommend her? Once she comes out again this April, I would say yes, if you can get her for a small discount. If you can get her for around 10k or 11k, I would say it is already a good buy. Though depending on where you live, yes, shipping cost will matter, of course. Is this the best Scathach Lancer figure? Absolutely not, because the paintwork on the Q-Skill version is actually much better, like way better than this Plum version. But does that mean the Plum version is bad? Absolutely not. The Plum version is very competent. In fact, when it comes to the sculpting and the pose of this figure, I actually prefer the Plum version over the Q-Skill version, right? Specifically the pose. The Q-Skill version, the figure quality itself is superior to this one, both the sculpt and the paint job, but the pose is kind of awkward to me in some way. Yeah, so you just pick your poison or you buy both, just like I'm planning to do over here. My case is a really special case where I got a major bargain on this figure. But if you could read Chinese and you don't want to wait until April, you want to buy the 2022 version, like this one over here, head over to Taobao and this figure of Scathach over here is everywhere. It is not rare at all. You can find her for around plus minus 500 Chinese yuan, right? I had a small discount coupon and all those points I accumulated on the website. So I got a small discount and got her slightly cheaper, but she is averaging 500 to 540 Chinese yuan or so, which is still insanely cheap for what you're getting. Not a perfect figure, far from the best figure, but a very competent one. If you enjoyed this review, please give this video a thumbs up, a like, and subscribe to this channel for more content like this every week. And of course, I have a Genshin Impact figure review coming, just that I still don't know when because I have not received the figure yet. It is coming out this January. I'll leave it to you to guess what figure it is, but it is from Genshin Impact, right? Until then, I'll see you guys again really soon. Goodbye.